The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
At that time Jesus responded, I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. For although you've hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you reveal them to the childlike. Yes, Father, such has been your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, everybody, I've got the great privilege and pleasure today to preach about St. Catherine of Siena. As I said, one of the really key players in the history of the Church. Catherine, born in 1347, so it gives you a sense of her time. She was the 24th child of her parents. It gives you an idea of the family she came from. As a little girl of about 5, she had this extraordinary vision. You can stand in Siena on the spot where she had the vision. Looking out over the great church, she saw saints in the heavens and Christ in the vesture of the Pope. Here's a 5-year-old girl. She has this vision. And gosh, it set the tone for much of her life because, you know, at the heart of her pastoral work, you might say, was getting the Pope to leave Avignon, where he had ensconced himself, and return to Rome. Catherine, when she confronted the Pope, was an unlettered, uneducated woman of no particular ecclesial or societal status. And yet it was the intensity of her holiness that gave her this access to the Pope and persuaded the Pope to do what she wanted. He returned, in fact, to Rome. It gives you a sense of the spiritual power this woman had. Some of the leading lights of her time gathered around her. She was mamma to a familia, a little family of people that she formed around her. Throughout her life, she had these ecstasies and visions. She'd go into kind of a trance. People would be able to kind of prick her with needles. She'd feel nothing. And after these trances, she would report these extraordinary encounters with heavenly realities. She also was a woman very dedicated to the concrete service of the poor. So her heavenly ecstasies did nothing to obviate her concern and active work on behalf of the poor. She died very young, about 33 years old, but had a massive impact on the church of her time. Let me just say one quick thing about her teaching. It's an image that has stayed with me a lot. She compares the Lord Jesus Christ to a bridge. She sees sin as kind of this chaotic, water. And the Lord has created for us this bridge that will enable us to climb out of the water of sin and to come to union with God. Now, to get what she means, think of if you've been to Florence in Italy, or you've seen one of these medieval bridges, like the Ponte Vecchio in Florence. It's this bridge with different levels of buildings and edifices and so on. That's what she's got in mind when she talks about the bridge. First level of the bridge, as we just kind of climb our way out of the water of sin, that would be what she called a servile love of Christ. That means someone who loves Christ, but largely out of fear. It's the fear of hell, the fear of losing God, that causes us to cling to Christ. Now, mixing metaphors, as is her wont, she then compares that to kissing the feet of the crucified Jesus. So it's often the first step in the spiritual life, and that's okay. There are a lot of people, put in our terminology today, maybe it isn't so much for people today, the abject fear of hell, but it might be that they're just in such a terrible situation of depression or addiction, that it's just a desire to get out of that leads you to cling, as it were, to the first level of the bridge, to cling to the feet of Christ. So servile love, the love of like a slave to a master. Well, then you move to the next level, Catherine says. Next level of the bridge would be love of Christ because of the wonderful benefits that come from that love. So I moved beyond just servile fear of losing something. Now I've benefited from my intimacy with Christ. It corresponds in that mixed metaphor now to kissing of the wounded side of Jesus. You know, very often in my work in the seminary, especially as rector of the seminary, you'd see people that would come to the seminary in the full enthusiasm of this level of a spiritual life. They're finding such joy and such fulfillment, such reward in their relationship with the Lord. They've moved beyond just servile fear. They've now come to a kind of filial relationship, like a son to a father relationship. Good. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a higher level. I'm loving Christ because of these great benefits that are coming to me. But Catherine says it, John of the Cross says it after her. All the great masters agree with this. Finally, we are called to love Christ. Not because of fear, and not because of the benefits that come to us. We're called to love Christ simply for his own sake. We love him even when we don't get benefit from him. Even when the love of Christ is summoning us to total abandonment of self. John of the Cross is very eloquent on this point, where he'll say, very often in the spiritual life, once you move beyond servile love, and you've begun to benefit, you enjoy this relationship with the Lord. Okay, says John of the Cross, trust me, he's going to take it away from you. Now, not because he's just being difficult, because we're not called to love the benefits that come from Christ. We're called to love Christ. Think now of the great saints, especially the martyrs. Think of Maximilian Kolbe as he's giving his life to save his brother at Auschwitz. What was in it for him? What benefit was coming to him by that act? Well, nothing. He was giving his whole life. That corresponds, Catherine says now, to the highest level of the bridge. This is loving Christ for his own sake alone. Stay with the other metaphor. We've gone from kissing the feet of Christ to kissing the wounded side. Now it's the kiss of the mouth. That's also in St. Bernard, also in St. John of the Cross. The kiss of the mouth, that's from the Song of Songs, right? Let him kiss me with the kiss of his mouth. But the idea there is it's an intimacy with Christ that goes beyond the benefits that might accrue to me because of the relationship. It's loving Christ for his own sake. Well, the good news, fellow sinners here, all of us who are to different degrees, we're kind of splashing about in the water of sin, that God the Father has given us this great bridge, which is God the Son. Well, maybe it's just out of servile fear that I cling to the bridge. Okay, fine. That's the first level. But then keep climbing up that great bridge. Keep moving into deeper and deeper intimacy with Christ until finally we come to love him for his own sake. That's the height of the spiritual life for Catherine of Siena.